evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We will begin shortly. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We're very excited for our workshop tonight, Making a Career Comeback During a Pandemic. We've had several virtual workshops over the past 6 months, but sometimes technology is not always our friend, so please be patient with us. There's a lot going on in our lives right now, so please know that Ardent is always here for you. If you need to ask a question tonight during the workshop, please click the Questions tab and type in your question. The photo to the left is the screen of an iPad, and the photo to the right is the screen of a desktop. We will relay questions to Samara during the seminar. There will also be a Q&A session after the workshop. If you are viewing the workshop from a smartphone, you will have to swipe right to see the PowerPoint. And now I will pass this over to Samara, the Career Specialist and Licensed Social Worker at JEVS Human Services, to get the workshop started.
Hi everyone, I'm Samara Fritzsche from JEVS Career Strategies. Hi, thanks for joining us tonight for making a career comeback during a pandemic. Just a little bit about JEVS Career Strategies and our career counseling services, which you are welcome to utilize at any point. We provide one-on-one career consulting, and during this time we're doing it through Zoom sessions, which is really convenient for everyone. I do a lot of helping people with their resumes, cover letters, coaching them on interviewing, as well as branding yourself through LinkedIn. And for those that are unsure what kind of position they're seeking, we do have career assessments, which can be really helpful. So we've put our information here. Wendy Rosenfeld's our administrative assistant, and you can give her a call to make an appointment. And I do want to put it out there for you that you can have your first session for free. So that's always helpful, and we're a nonprofit, so we're very affordable. So I look forward to hopefully working with some of you one-on-one. So this evening, we're going to cover a lot in terms of finding a job. So we're going to talk about the job search process itself, how you can network from home, how you can prepare for the virtual interview, which is new to a lot of you, I'm sure, and how you can get your career development materials updated, including your resume. And then lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about negotiation. And definitely have a little bit of time for questions and answers from you. So please feel free to ask questions. As we said, you can put them in the chat, or you can ask them at the end. So let's get started. First, I just want to acknowledge that we're in such a unique time right now during this COVID pandemic, where the unemployment rate is higher than it even typically is. And so emotionally speaking, most people are going through different stages. There's a lot of fear, especially in the beginning, if you've just recently gotten furloughed or laid off of your job, and also at the beginning back in March of questioning what's going on. And this can really affect your productivity with the search. So the next phase that we hope people are moving into would be the learning phase. And we'll talk a little bit about how you can make yourself more competitive. What are some of the affordable things you can do from home to get some certifications and improve your skills? Part of the learning zone is also improving your career development materials, making sure that your resume is as great as it can be, because that's all that people have to go on when you're applying, obviously. And then into the growth zone. where you are really trying to stay in the moment and be productive every day and getting more confident with your networking and your interviewing skills. It's very normal to go back and forth between these different phases emotionally, and important to have a good support network during this time, of course. So as I said a moment ago, we wanted to share some information about where you can find some affordable trainings. This is so important because you want to put yourself ahead of the competition in every way possible, right? And sometimes that's expensive. So here are some options for you. MOOCs are free college classes. So you can actually just Google MOOC and you can find a lot of open online courses that you can take to improve skills. There's also a couple more listed here: Coursera, edX. Udemy is getting to be really popular and has great reviews, as well as Allison. And then I listed a few more for you that I just want to point some of them out. If you need to improve your technical skills, you know, if you feel like you really wish you had advanced Excel, PowerPoint, whatever it may be, gfclearnfree.org is good. And free, as well as the Microsoft website. So that's just the basic Microsoft website that's got training for all of their software applications. So let's move on to how do we locate the open jobs? How do we find jobs that we want to apply for right now? So in terms of keeping an eye on the postings, you're going to develop your favorite job search boards if you haven't already. I typically recommend LinkedIn as well as Indeed as the top two to my clients. And then there are some more niche job search sites such as Idealist, which has all nonprofit jobs, Glassdoor, which has a lot of reviews from people who have worked there, and salary information, as well as interviewing tips for those companies. And Filler Culture, which is great if you're looking for something in Philadelphia, of course, that is either from a nonprofit or a cultural institution. So we're also going to talk in a minute about how to search specifically for remote positions. I know that that's a big concern these days and a big worry in terms of going into the office. And we want to think about what are the growth industries, particularly if you are transitioning from one industry to another. You want to pick an industry that's growing, right? Healthcare is always a good option. IT, e-commerce, Amazon is booming right now, as we know. Anything in online education, telemedicine, and then a few more that I've listed there. So we put a link down here, and if you're receiving these slides, or you can refer back to this because this is being recorded, and you could go ahead and look at that article, and it's got a lot of the top companies that are hiring en masse at all times. So in terms of searching for remote positions, this is just a screenshot from Indeed.com. And I wanted to point out what you're going to do if you're searching for remote. You can type the word remote in the where box where you would typically write, you know, your zip code or Philadelphia. And you can also use the advanced filters. As you see, one says remote here. There's 296 remote jobs. And it delineates those that are permanently remote from those that are temporarily remote just during COVID times. Something else that's important to keep in mind is how you're going about searching. What keywords are you putting into the what box up there? So this is case manager, and as you can see, it's got the quotations around it, and that keeps the two words together during that search, which is important because if you don't put the quotations and you've got two words, you might get a lot of managerial positions or a lot of positions that say the word case in them, but it's not going to be specifically what you're looking for. Another way of searching, which is kind of creative, and most people don't know about this, so I think it's a nice tip, is to use that what box to put your skills in there or your strengths. So this was a client of mine who wasn't really sure what she should be applying for. She didn't have a focus for her career objective. And I asked her, what are your strengths? And she says, writing, my presentation skills, and my Excel skills. So we put those words in there. And we came up with a lot of marketing positions. So that helped her come up with her career objective in just doing that. So let's talk about how you can build your professional network from home. Networking is not an easy concept for most people because you really have to come up with a plan and put yourself out there and be strategic about it. It is really, really important. Because if you're just applying for jobs and you're not doing any follow-up, or you're not reaching out to actual people at the companies or actual people that could help refer you for that position, it's going to take a lot longer. Most people end up getting their jobs through networking. So there are 3 types of networking. We encourage you to get comfortable with your elevator speech. So that anytime you meet someone new, you can introduce yourself and you can give a little overview about yourself professionally, right? It's maybe just a 60-second overview. And we can work on that one-on-one if you need help with that. Another type would be reaching out to people who work at companies where you want to work to help you get noticed, right? So you have lots of friends and family members that work at all different companies, some of which you might be interested in. And you want to be able to make a list of those people and reach out and ask them if you could have a 15-minute phone call, just so you can learn more about their role at the company. And then that's a good networking opportunity to help tighten that bond that you have with the person, because in the discussion, you'll hopefully get to the point where you'll let them know that you're looking and you're very interested, and you might even get to ask them if you could send your resume over and get a referral for a position that you are interested in. And the third basic way would be to set up meetings with people that you already know. For information and advice. So that's a little bit similar to number 2. Who do we network with? Everyone and anyone. It could be your hairdresser, could be your friend, acquaintance, could be someone from a meetup club. It could be one of your alumni from high school or college. And you can also use LinkedIn to help you with networking, and we'll get into that in a little bit. So in terms of who specifically we want to reach out to, really try to brainstorm. What are the names of companies where you'd be interested in working at now or in the future? Who do I know that has a job that I find interesting and I'd like to know more about? And who are the people in my life that are successful, that seem to be connected to a lot of other people who I respect, right? So these are all people that you're going to put into your people and companies that you're going to put into your networking plan. And it's better if you create a formal document to help yourself run through the process. So let's talk about LinkedIn for a few minutes. Ooh, excuse me for 1 second. I'm not sure what happened. We'll get right back to our LinkedIn slide. LinkedIn is a huge social network. I'm sure you've probably heard the expression 6 degrees of separation. So I know someone who knows someone else who knows someone else. It's bringing it all together. And there are probably at this point at least 3 million people on LinkedIn who are hired through their connections every year. It's very heavily used by recruiters. So as this illustrates 92% of recruiters are using LinkedIn to reach out to candidates and try to help connect them with interviews on a daily basis. So the way that you are crafting your LinkedIn profile, which is branding yourself professionally, is very, very important. It's important because hopefully you're going to apply for jobs through LinkedIn, right? And when you apply, you know that the employer is going to be looking at your LinkedIn profile. So they're making an assessment as to whether they want to bring you in for an interview based on how you've presenting yourself. Do you have a good professional headshot? Do you have a good headline? Do you seem like a good match for that role? So who's on LinkedIn? Professionals, right? So this is a social media site like none other. It's nothing like Facebook, which is much more casual. It is just for professional networking purposes. Lots of professionals, lots of job seekers on there, lots of recruiters and HR people, as well as entrepreneurs. So if you're not already having a profile, I encourage you to get on there and check it out. It's not going to be a bad idea. No matter what you do, it's going to be helpful. We want to make sure that we get your profile to 100% completion. Here are some basic tips that you want to make sure that you complete. You're going to have a headline, which identifies yourself, right? So I'm a career counselor. My headline might be career counselor, networker, strategist. You can include a couple of different titles in there. It doesn't have to be just one. It's going to ask you what industry you're interested in being in. So you're going to have to choose that from a drop-down box. And it's essentially going to be your online resume, right? It's your marketing tool that anyone can see you from because it's publicly posted. So you want to have at least 2 or more positions, just as if you would on your resume. Your education section, you're going to put your skills. You're going to have a headshot of yourself. If you don't have a professional headshot, it's okay. You know, try to find something that looks semi-professional. You want to have at least 50 connections because it doesn't look good if you seem like you're not connected. So the goal is to get hopefully maybe over 100 or a couple hundred connections as you get more into it. But definitely work on that. You don't want to have a profile that's got 10 connections. It's not going to look great. I mean, it'll be 10 in the beginning, but try to build it up quickly. And then you can get recommendations from people that you've worked with, supervisors or coworkers, and that really strengthens it. So here's an example of, this is my coworker actually, Jackie Savoy. She's got her photo up top, her headshot, and then that other picture, which is the Rittenhouse skyline, is something that she put in there. A stock LinkedIn photo is there if you don't choose to make it unique and replace it, but it's nice to set yourself apart to put a picture in there and have it not just be the stock photo. So under Jackie's name, you'll see her headline, and she, like I said, you can choose a couple of different keywords. She's got more than a couple. She's got 2 lines worth, and that's fine. And up top there, you're going to have your current position. She works at JEVS. You can opt to include your education, where you went to college or high school, as well as the number of connections that you have. So how you are crafting your headline is really important because that is a short little synopsis of how you're identifying yourself professionally, right? So here are some examples to share with you. Someone might be a sales executive, or that same person might choose to state that their headline as medical sales executive dash consistently ranked top performer. So which one do you think sounds more impressive? I would say medical sales executive, consistently ranked top performer is much more specific and impressive. However, there are pros and cons to both. When you add the word medical in there, it's you know, kind of pigeonholing you into that one field of sales. And if that person was applying for other sales executive positions, not just medical, they wouldn't want to add that word. So these are all the kinds of things that you want to consider when you are writing your headline. You want to use keywords that would be used in the position, in the job postings. Keywords are very important. And you want it to be something that's relatable in terms of what you're looking for. So in terms of finding jobs on LinkedIn, at the top of the page, you're gonna see the ribbon, and you'll see the word jobs, and there's a little icon of a suitcase right there. So that's what you're gonna click on. And just like any other job search site, there's advanced filters, and you're gonna wanna use those so that you're not scrolling through, you know, hundreds of jobs, some of them being very irrelevant. So the more filters you use, the more time you can save. LinkedIn also sends you jobs based on your profile, the keywords that you've used to write your profile, based on your past job searches. And in addition to that, and you can opt to receive those job opportunities as emails or just on the site. There's a spot on the site where they'll pop up as potential jobs you might be interested in applying for. And in addition, you can create a job alert, just like you can on Indeed or any other job board. So you want to make sure that you fill in the career interests on LinkedIn, because that will help fine-tune what's being sent your way from the site. And
Samara, before we move forward, we do have a question that came in.
Sure.
So our question was, specifically with LinkedIn, should you write your description in first person or third person?
That's a great question. You should write your profile in the third person, right? And that would be the same advice that I would give you about your resume. And we'll get more onto resume in a minute. You can actually copy and paste straight from your resume onto your LinkedIn profile. So that is typically how I help people with their profiles. We'll get the resume tightened up first, and then it's really going to mimic what you have on the resume, okay? And one other huge benefit of using LinkedIn, which we didn't get into, there's so much that you can do with it. You have to play around, and I'm sure some of you already have, is that when you apply for a job, it will automatically, the site will automatically tell you if you have any connections that work at that company, right? So I work at JEVS. If you, for instance, applied for a job at JEVS and you were connected to me, which you can feel free to invite me to connect and I'll accept, and you applied for a job, then on that list, when you see the job opening, it'll automatically tell you that Samara Fritzsche is a first-degree connection that works there. Now that's going to prompt you to reach out to me and follow up for networking purposes. So after you apply, you'll go ahead and you'll send me a message, and you'll probably do something like, for instance, ask if you can have a quick phone call with me for networking purposes. And then after we talk, you know, you'll let me know that you applied for a job at the company that I work at. And if all goes in the right direction and I seem like you'd be a good fit, then of course I would recommend you to HR, which would help you get an interview. Okay, so that would be the ideal pathway, and one of the benefits of using LinkedIn.
All right, and we do have one more question in regards to LinkedIn. Is it necessary to hire someone to help you with creating your LinkedIn profile? And will that person get better results if they choose to hire somebody to help them?
That's a good question. It's a hard question to answer though, because it really depends how good of a writer you are, right? and how good your resume is. So, you know, for my clients, I feel confident that they have a great resume because I've written it for them. And I also feel confident that their LinkedIn looks great because it's pretty much, you know, very similar to the resume. And when I say great, I mean, I optimize it in terms of search engine optimization. I'm optimizing it to make sure that I've included all the industry specific keywords based on what type of position they're applying for, right? So it's not just how it's written, it's got to have the right keywords, the right position titles. If you're applying for a client services manager and you've previously worked as a customer service support staff, you know, you might be able to change your position title a little bit on the resume to better match what you're applying for. You can't drastically change it. It has to be within the same scope. But little things like that we can help you with. As I said before, and you should try to do it on your own. You shouldn't be afraid to do it on your own. You shouldn't feel like you need my help or you're not going to do it, right? So do what you can on your own, and if you feel like you need assistance, feel free to reach out, especially because, like I said, you get a free first appointment, and we are extremely affordable. Our motive is not actually making money, believe it or not. Our motive is helping people get jobs. Any more questions before we move on?
Not for now, but just a reminder that if you do have a question, you can click the questions tab on your dashboard, type in your question and hit submit, and we'll communicate them to Samara.
Okay, thanks. So here, as we talked a minute ago, I referenced optimizing your resume and your LinkedIn profile. And one of the things involved in that is making sure that it is applicant tracking system ready. So the applicant tracking system is the software that all mid to large size companies are using to scan your resume. And the software scans it to see if it's got enough of the relevant information for that position you're applying for. And that happens before it gets to the human eye, right? So the recruiter is only going to be taking a look at it if the ATS, the applicant tracking system, sends it in the go pile, right? So there's certain things that you want to do to make sure that it's ready for the ATS. One of them is don't use a template. A lot of times my new clients come to me with resumes that were created in a template format, and everything's plugged into a chart, and the ATS does not like the charts. So you want to just start out with a blank Word document when you're typing your resume, and save it in Word, and then you can save another version in PDF. And when you upload the resume, sometimes the instructions will tell you to use the PDF, in which case you'll follow that. If it doesn't specify what kind of document to upload, then you would go ahead and use the Word document. If you don't have Word on your computer, then you can use the PDF. We want to use simple formatting, so that means no headers or footers. So all your information up top, your name, your address, your phone number, your email, your LinkedIn address, that's going to be straight in the body of the resume, not in a header. We want to make sure that you're customizing each resume for each application. So if you're applying for 15 positions and you use the same exact resume for each one, the odds are not going to be in your favor for getting that interview. You got to look at the job posting, you know, highlight. A lot of times I'll copy the job posting into a Word document and go through and use the highlighter in Word. Highlight, what are the keywords? What's most important to this employer in this position? Do I have these keywords peppered throughout my resume? If not, let me add some more of them, right? That's going to help it get through the applicant tracking system. And then once it gets through, that's going to help the recruiter feel like you are someone that they really want to bring in as a potential candidate. Of course, we want to edit carefully. Spell check does not always catch everything because you might have a word that means one thing and isn't used in the right place. So always have a couple people read your resume over. After you look at it for enough time, you're not even seeing the mistakes anymore. Oop. Let's go back to that one. So here are some more tips. We won't go through every single one of them, but just a couple I want to point out. As I mentioned, no tables. 11 point is a good size for your font. If you have an advanced degree like an MBA or a CPA, you're not going to want to put that after your name at the top. The ATS does not like that. You would put that in your education section. You would also spell it out. If you go down to the bottom bullet, you'll see you would put certified public accountant, but you would also put CPA. Same thing with the MBA. There are some fonts that are better for the ATS. Here's a list of some of them. You can also Google ATS friendly fonts. Arial, Georgia, Tahoma, Calibri, Verdana. A lot of people have Times New Roman resumes, which is kind of looking like a typewriter and outdated, so I wouldn't recommend that. And just one more point on this. When you're you don't always have to put the months on your resume. You can actually just put the years. It's up to you. Sometimes the resume looks better with the months or without, depending on the time frame between jobs. I would have to assess that to see what was better, or you can assess it yourself. If you do put the months, you are going to want to put them in a numerical format instead of spelling them out, and they'll go on the right-hand side. So now let's look at a sample. So it's a little bit small, but you can at least see the different sections. The profile section on the top, which is a overview, right? And this is very similar to what you're going to use when we talked about your elevator speech in the beginning, right? So this is just a tip. If you do a summary section or a profile, you can use this to help you develop your elevator speech that you're using for networking. Then you're going to have your career experience. Make sure that everything's formatted consistently. Typically, you have the company name and then the position title underneath. As I said, the dates on the right. And it's nice to have a little overview of what you did underneath before you get into your bullet points. Your bullet points are not just responsibilities. You want to make them accomplishment based, right? That's going to be much more unique in terms of your qualifications than just responsibilities. You never want to say duties or responsible for. That's boring. We want to start each bullet with an action verb: created, typed, researched, produced, planned, as you can see on this one. Okay. Technology skills section is important for most people these days. So you typically do want to include that, unless of course you don't have great computer skills, then you're not going to put that on there, and hopefully you're not applying for a position that requires that. You're also going to have, or you could have, community volunteer activities. And down at the bottom, you're going to have your education. The only time that your education would be up top under your profile is if you're a recent college graduate or a recent high school graduate. Otherwise, the education is going to always be your last section. So this is a typical chronological resume. One more thing I want to point out. In the profile, we've got some bulleted strengths here. So those are great because you're using keywords that are going to be in the job posting, and it's an easy way to swap those out to make it relevant for that specific job right there. A less popular version of the resume would be the functional resume, right? And I say less popular because it's not the preferred format by HR and by recruiters. However, it could be better for you in some instances. If you have a gap in your work history, it takes the emphasis off of the years that you've had certain positions, and it puts the emphasis on your skill sets. So it's organized by skill set, and it's got your accomplishment bullets within each of those skill set categories. And then it's got your employment history, just much more smaller section that just says, you know, basically what your position was, what the company was, and what the years are. And once again, under that would be volunteer or community involvement, and if you want to include that, and your education section. A bit more comprehensive than the functional format would be the hybrid. So the hybrid resume is great because it is going with the reverse chronological order of your job. So always your present position or your most recent position at the top, going backwards in time. And then within each of those categories where you've got your position, you're going to highlight some of those skill sets that you feel were your strengths, and you're going to put your accomplishments under there. So this is a nice way to do it, and much preferable to the purely functional format. So a few tips in terms of things that you want to consider when you're writing your resume and you are over 50 years old. And the reason that I wanted to include this is because unfortunately there is age discrimination. We wish that there wasn't, but you know, no one needs to know how old you are based on your resume, and that is determined by how you're going to write it. Of course, when you get to the interview, you know, if you're 60 years old, they're not going to think that you're 30, but that doesn't matter at that point, hopefully, because you already are in front of their face and you can have the chance to, you know, really shine and show what your skills are. So you don't want to go back more than 15 to 20 years typically. People are most interested in finding out about your recent experience anyway. So if you did something 25 years ago and you include those dates, then that is obviously showing your age to some extent. You do not want to put down the years that you graduated from school. You want to leave that off unless you're a recent graduate. And you want to make sure that you're including your technical skills section and that you're really highlighting that you have great computer skills, and hopefully that's the case. So those are a couple of tips there. And now we're going to talk about, yes.
We have a couple questions that came in.
Sure.
So one of our questions is, when is it appropriate for your resume to be more than one page?
Sure, good question. It is perfectly acceptable for your resume to be one page. You should try to keep it to 2 pages. Some people do go beyond that and they've got 3-page resumes. That's not the norm though. So try to keep it to 2 pages. If it's 1 page and then it's going on to the next page by 3 or 4 lines, then you're going to want to play around with the formatting, or, you know, delete a couple of things, or decrease the font size of the empty spaces in between sections and condense it to get it onto 1 page, because you don't really want it to be 1 page and then a 2nd page with only a couple of lines. But if it's a page and a half, or full 2 pages, or a page and a third, that's fine.
All right, and we have one more question. It's in regards to the job description, and how many bullet points should you have per job?
Okay, sure. So that depends on the length of time that you were at that job, right? So if I had a job and I was only there for 6 months or a year, I'm probably not going to have more than a couple of bullet points. But for me, in actuality, I've been at my job for almost 16 years. So I'm going to have a lot of bullet points, and that's okay because I have a lot to say about it. Okay, so there's not a certain particular number that I can give. I just want to let you know it depends on another part of it is that it depends on what success stories you want to share in those bullet points and how many positive results you really want to get into that based on how productive you got to be in that position.
All right, and we have one more question. It's about that hybrid resume, and is there like a specific time you would use that resume for a specific job?
Typically, people are using the chronological resume, which is the Mary Admin sample I showed you first. And if you feel like you need a functional resume, it would be for a specific reason. And if you want to do functional, I would recommend the hybrid, because it's more clear cut and it shows, in what job you had each accomplishment and each responsibility rather than lumping it into the sections without the employers there. Now you're going to want to use that hybrid functional version if you are transitioning from one industry to another and you want to highlight your experience in a way that takes the emphasis off of that transition. Or maybe you're pivoting within the same industry, but you're pivoting positions. So you're making a career change and you want to highlight things a little bit differently by including those skill sets. And the other major reason for using the functional over the chronological would be, as I said before, if you have a gap in your work history and you want to take the eye away from that.
All right,
Okay.
that was our last question for now. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so virtual interviewing is new for a lot of people. We're used to going in person. We're not all used to this interviewing from our homes, from the computer. There's a couple of different options that employers are using. There's different software platforms. A popular one would be HireVue, which I put down here. And if that's the one, that's the type of process that they're using, there will be pre-recorded questions that are asked. So it's not going to be like a live person on the other end. Either the question will be typed out and then you'll have the opportunity to answer it. You'll press the record button and it's recording the footage of you answering that question. And I do want to say you'll have a chance to practice that before you get started with the interview. Practice in a way that's not recorded. Other companies are using Zoom or Skype. So that's more like a human interaction. It's more like a live interview because there's a person on the other end that you're interacting with. Now that could be recorded or not recorded. It's at the interviewer's discretion, and typically they would ask you if it's okay to record if they plan on doing that. So we always want to do whatever kind of calming activity you can to get yourself in a place of feeling most comfortable, although everyone gets nervous, and that's a universal phenomenon to get nervous before the interview. You want to make sure that you're as much yourself as possible. You don't want to be getting to the point where you're so anxious and nervous and you're telling yourself, if I don't get this job, I won't be able to pay this bill or that bill. If you prep yourself in that way, your personality is not going to shine. You're not going to be smiling. You're not going to be engaging in a conversation in the same way. So try to have a little self-talk before the interview and tell yourself, I'm going to do my best. If this doesn't work out, there's going to be another. That's really important. So besides preparing yourself emotionally, we're going to get to that part in a minute, to the storytelling. Sorry, I'm trying to go backwards. Thank you. Okay. On the next one, we've got a screenshot of what the higher view looks like. If you happen to have this kind of an interview, this is what you'll see. You see the question typed out, and then that person right there is going ahead with their response, and you see the little green bar on the bottom as they're talking and it's being recorded. So the PAR formula is a little hint that we a little tip that we like to give our clients, because it helps you stay on track and concise with your storytelling. So with every story that exemplifies a strength or anything that you're answering in the interview, you want to tell about the problem, or maybe it's a SAR, the problem or the situation, the action that you took to improve that, and the result, okay? So on the interview, stories sell, right? This is through life. Salespeople in their jobs are telling stories about how a product improved someone's life. You go to an interview, you're going to tell stories about your strengths and how you utilize them. Because if you're not telling stories, the person's not going to necessarily feel like that's a valid point that you're making. Okay, so here's an example of a PAR story that someone might tell. Maybe the question in the interview was, tell me about how you improved a process at your last job, or how you made some kind of, how you streamlined something to make it smoother. So the problem, too many of our clients were missing their appointments. Your action that you took. After researching the situation, I found out that most of the appointments were made at least 2 weeks in advance. I instituted a procedure where 24 hours before the appointment, each client would receive a phone call which reminded them about the appointment. Your result. As a result, we improved attendance at appointments by over 50% in the course of 6 months. Okay, so when you tell this story, you're not going to say, here was the problem, here was the action, here was the result. But we've teased it out for you in this way because that's how you're thinking about it, to stay on point and concise in your mind as you're telling the story. So here are some typical interview questions. It always, almost always, starts out with, tell me about yourself. Okay, they don't want to know where you were born or who's in your family. They want to know about your professional self, right? Give them your 2-minute commercial. It's a lot like your elevator speech. Tell them about your work history, your education if it's relevant, some of your strengths and accomplishments. Okay, and what's really important to know in this response is that you're making it specific for the position you're interviewing for. If I were interviewing for a career counseling position at a university and I was going to be working with students, then when I did the tell me about yourself response, I would go into how I've worked with, how many of the clients that I work with are students, and that we have a internship program that is all high school and college age students, and I'm working with them individually and presenting workshops to help them with the following things. If I were interviewing for a career counseling position that specifically wanted me to have experience working with 55 plus people that were over 50 or over 55, I wouldn't say anything about my experience working with youth. I would say about my experience working with that specific population. So you have to always keep in mind that that's really important. So you want to pick 2 or 3 areas that are related to the job that you're applying, right? And these would be your strengths. So they might ask you, what are your strengths? These should be found in the job posting itself. So you always want to review the job posting before you go into that interview. And you want to give an accomplishment statement for each, right? An accomplishment statement might include that PAR story. I have fantastic communication skills. I'd like to share a little story about that. So they're not asking you for the story when you're telling your strengths. but you're volunteering the story because that's what they're going to remember, and that's what the other candidates are not going to do. So it's going to set you apart. Okay, so this is the dreaded question. What are your weaknesses? We never want to tell weaknesses that are personality traits. We all have some weaknesses that are personality traits, right? Maybe I'm not a morning person, or maybe I have trouble focusing, or whatever the case is. Don't give anything huge away. You keep that tucked under the rug, right? You want to give a weakness which is going to be completely irrelevant for that position. So this is, we're using the opposite thinking as to when we answered, what are your strengths? When we answer, what are your strengths? We're taking our strengths straight from the job posting. They have to be relevant to that job. What are your weaknesses? It's got to be totally unrelated. So if I'm interviewing for a data entry position, maybe it's okay if I'm not comfortable with public speaking, because I'm not going to do any of that on that job. So maybe that's my weakness. Okay, so that's how you want to come up with it based on that premise. What do you know about our company? Well, this is a commonly asked question, and if you don't know anything about the company, you're in trouble, right? So you make sure that you do your research, look at their website, Google the company, and really do an in-depth, thorough job of learning about the department that you would be working for and the company itself. Of course, take a look at the mission statement too, but don't let that be the only thing you're looking at. Look at the entire website. And if you're doing a virtual interview, you can have a little cheat sheet, right? So you can have notes to the side with bullet points of things that you want to mention when they answer certain questions. You want to have this all put together so you're not coming up with it on the spot. You want to do this prep work ahead of time. So now we're just going to talk for a couple minutes. We're getting towards the end about negotiating. So negotiation's really important. Obviously, because we want to get the highest salary that we can possibly get within reason. As we know, we don't always get a raise every year. And if we do, it might be 3%, which isn't that much. So what you come in at is extremely important. There are a lot of things that you can negotiate besides salary, and I want you to keep that in mind also. So and I want to mention, you are never going to bring up the salary during the interview. You wait for them to make the offer before you bring that up. They might ask you during the interview, what kind of salary are you looking for? And then you want to have a range in mind, okay? So you can use these websites, salary.com, Glassdoor, or ONET online, to research what is the median wage for the position I'm going for in the state that I live in. You want to really have an idea. If you are a dental hygienist in Philadelphia, you want to know what's the median wage that dental hygienists in Philadelphia are making. So not just the state, but the city. Get a little more specific. And that will help you come up with your range that you're looking for. And of course, it's also based on number of years experience and your education. So you should have a realistic vision in mind. You're not going to even think about negotiating until you have a firm offer. First thing you're going to want to do is express excitement, right? Always thank the person. If they're calling you to make you the offer, you're going to thank them so much. I'm really excited about this opportunity. And then you can ask them if you can get back to them within 24 hours, right? You can give yourself a little bit of time to think about how to negotiate for this and what you want to ask for. If you're doing it through email, you can do the same thing. Thank them and ask them if you could get back to them within 24 to 48 hours. So as we go through with this, you don't ever want to use your personal needs as a reason for needing a higher salary. So what if my car broke and I'm going to need to take public transportation? I'm not going to tell them that the reason I'm negotiating. You're going to have to, really sell yourself on trying to get $5,000 more or whatever it is you're trying to get. And the reasons should always be based on what you bring to the table and what you have to offer for that position, your skills, your experience, right? You should know what your walk away point is. Always leave the door open though, and never say no to an offer before it's made. Okay, so you want to wait, even if the offer is made and you're thinking, I'm not interested, this isn't enough money, don't say no right away. Give yourself 24 hours to think about it, and then you can try to negotiate. Do we have any questions on negotiation?
No, not on negotiating.
Okay. All right, so we are at the end of almost at the end of our time, and we wanted to leave a couple questions, a couple minutes for whatever questions you have at this point. I know I covered a lot of topics in a short amount of time, so please feel free to ask questions.
All right, we do have 2 questions that did come through. The first one is about Zoom interviews, and if you have any tips that you can share for someone with a virtual interview.
Okay. Well, does this person have a more specific question? Because we did go over virtual interviewing and Zoom interviewing. You know, I guess a couple more things that I could add to that if you don't have a more specific question.
Pertaining to like your setup, like what should be in like your background.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. Sure. You want to make sure that you're in an area where there's not a lot of chaos in the background, right? So you don't want to, for instance, be in your kitchen and have your sink showing. You want to be in a space where the lighting is good, okay? So sometimes when I'm doing a Zoom session with a client, I'll notice that the lighting's not right. It's too much light behind me, or the sun changes and it's coming through the blinds and it's putting streaks of light on my face, and I always move to a different spot. Of course, you want to dress, at least from the top up, as if you are going to a real interview. So, you know, you want to look as professional as you would if you were going in person. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, and that was our last question for the Q&A session, Samara.
Okay. Well, I thank you so much for joining us. I just last slide here would be our information if we can assist you in any way.
All right, and thank you, Samara, for providing us with some great information about making a career comeback during uncertain times. We would like to thank everyone for attending. There will be a short survey sent out via email, and we would love to hear your feedback to help us improve for future workshops. Our next workshop, titled How to Drive Away Your Best Car Deal with our Auto Concierge Experts, will be held on September 30th, and we hope you can join us. Thank you and have a great night.